They weren't just any couple. They were Hollywood royalty. And now, they're gone. In the most brutal, horrifying way imaginable. Rob Reiner, the beloved director behind classics like Stand By Me and The Princess Bride, was 78 years old. His wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, 70, found slaughtered in their Brentwood mansion. Throats slit, multiple stab wounds. No sign of forced entry, no sign of robbery. Just two bodies, side by side. Cold, lifeless. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But that's not the part that left the world speechless. It's what the autopsy revealed, and who was in the house that night. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a storm years in the making. A Hollywood legacy spiraling into chaos. And at the center of it, a son with a past, a party full of secrets, and a family unraveling in real time. Let's rewind. Because if you think this is just another tragic celebrity story, think again. This one gets darker the deeper you go. A legacy that built Hollywood. For decades, Rob Reiner wasn't just part of Hollywood. He shaped it. From his breakout role as Meathead on All in the Family, to directing cult-defining films that stitched themselves into American culture, Rob was a creator, an activist, a father figure in film. His work inspired millions. His voice carried weight not just on the screen, but in politics, social justice, and the media landscape. He was charming, fiery, sometimes controversial, but always respected. Michelle, his wife of over 3 decades, was known as his rock. Quietly powerful, deeply compassionate, a champion for mental health, homelessness, and children's rights. They weren't just a couple, they were a unit. A symbol of loyalty in an industry built on divorces and scandals. But as with all Hollywood fairy tales, sometimes the happy ending is just a disguise. Sunday morning horror. It was just after 9 a.m. when their daughter, Romy Reiner, arrived at the family's $13.5 million Brentwood estate. She hadn't heard from her parents since the night before. Nothing unusual, until her texts started bouncing. Her calls went to voicemail, and something just felt off. She let herself in with her key. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No dogs barking. No morning news playing on the TV. No fresh coffee in the kitchen. And then, she saw the streak of something dark on the floor near the staircase. It wasn't until she turned the corner into the den that she saw the full picture. Her parents, both of them, lying side by side on the floor. Michelle's arm was flung out, as if she'd tried to reach for something. Rob's eyes were still open. Their throats had been cut. There was blood everywhere. She screamed, collapsed, fumbled for her phone. Called 911. Her voice on that call, according to sources, was barely audible. All she kept saying was, "They're dead. They're dead. My parents are dead." Multiple sharp force injuries, what the autopsy said. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office released the findings 3 days later. Multiple sharp force injuries, it read. Homicide. Not an accident. Not a murder-suicide. No ambiguity. Just cold, calculated death. And here's where things start to twist. Because according to law enforcement, and this hasn't been officially confirmed but leaked by insiders, the wounds weren't random. They were targeted, patterned, as if someone knew exactly where to strike to inflict the most damage. Some even say Michelle was attacked first, Rob second, as if she was silenced to make him suffer. But who would want them dead? Who would know how to enter that heavily secured home, not trip any alarms, and carry out such a savage act without leaving behind a single fingerprint? That's when the whispers started, and one name kept coming up. Nick Reiner. The party that changed everything. It all goes back to Saturday night, the last time Rob and Michelle were seen alive. They had been invited to a high-profile holiday gathering hosted by none other than late-night legend Conan O'Brien. A festive, upscale event filled with A-listers, Hollywood power players, producers, and old friends. Rob and Michelle arrived around 7 p.m. They looked, by all accounts, normal, maybe a little reserved, but no signs of distress, until Nick showed up. Eyewitnesses at the party later told police, and the press, that things took a turn the moment Nick entered the room. Nick Reiner, 32, was not expected. He hadn't spoken publicly about his parents in months. He had a history of substance abuse, mental health struggles, and tensions with his family. He'd been in and out of rehab, rumors of violent outbursts, estrangement, and yet, there he was, uninvited. Sources say Michelle's face went pale when she saw him. And Rob? He was furious. There was shouting, a heated argument. Someone tried to defuse it, possibly Conan himself. But Rob's voice reportedly rang out across the room. "You're not welcome here. Not anymore." And Nick? He didn't yell back. He didn't cry. He just smirked, turned, and walked out. A family torn apart. To understand why that moment matters, we need to go deeper. Because this wasn't just a one-time family spat. It was the tip of an iceberg. Nick Reiner grew up in the Hollywood bubble. Lavish parties, elite schools, famous parents. From the outside, a charmed life. But behind closed doors, chaos. Nick struggled with drug addiction from a young age. By 17, he was in court-mandated treatment. By 21, he was already bouncing between halfway houses and luxury rehab centers. He was intelligent, charismatic, but volatile. In 2015, he co-wrote a semi-autobiographical film called Being Charlie, based on his own life. It portrayed a privileged teen battling addiction while trying to escape the long shadow of a famous father. The film was raw, honest, painful, and some say it was a public cry for help. But as Nick drifted further from the spotlight, things between him and his parents only grew worse. There were inheritance rumors, legal threats, even restraining orders whispered about, though never confirmed. And then silence. Until Saturday night. Why were they at the same party? That question has haunted investigators, fans, and friends alike. Why would Nick Reiner show up at Conan O'Brien's party? Some believe it wasn't a coincidence. Others suggest he found out through a mutual friend. One person who attended the party told TMZ, "It was like watching a grenade go off in slow motion. You could feel it. This wasn't just awkward. It was dangerous." Rob and Michelle left the party early. Witnesses say Rob was visibly shaking. Michelle was crying. They climbed into their black SUV, refused the valet's offer to drive them, and pulled out into the night, alone. No one would see them alive again. The first red flags. The next morning, their phones were off. Not unusual. But then texts from Romy and others went unanswered. A brunch appointment Michelle had scheduled was missed. The dogs hadn't been walked. Their private chef, scheduled to arrive around 10:30 a.m., was told not to come, via a mysterious text sent at 4:37 a.m. Police now believe that text was not sent by Michelle, because by 4:37 a.m., she was already dead. And here's the chilling part. The time of death, based on preliminary autopsy findings, between 3:45 and 4:15 a.m., which means whoever sent that text did it from her phone. After the murders, a cover-up, or a message. The home, that became a crime scene. Detectives arriving at the Brentwood estate were stunned. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no alarms triggered. The home's security system had been disarmed from the inside. There were 6 external security cameras around the property. All 6 went offline between 2:42 a.m. and 5:12 a.m. Power surge, system error, or deliberate tampering? The DVR storing the camera footage had been wiped. But what investigators did find was even more disturbing. In the hallway leading to the den, barely visible under a layer of smeared blood, was a partial shoe print. Size 11, Nike, limited edition. The same pair, coincidentally, that Nick Reiner was photographed wearing just days before. Coincidence? Or something darker? And then, the will was found. As the investigation continued, Rob and Michelle's legal team came forward with a shocking revelation. Just 2 weeks before the murders, the couple had updated their will. Nick was removed entirely. Romy was named as the sole heir. Why? Due to behavioral concerns, the will read. It was signed, notarized, filed, 2 weeks before they died. A coincidence? Or the final straw? And yet, this is just the beginning. Because everything you've just heard, every brutal detail, every haunting clue, is only the surface. The truth about what happened to Rob and Michelle Reiner is tangled in secrets. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover what really happened at Conan O'Brien's holiday party. The screaming, the threats, the cold stare that changed everything. Because what happened next would send shockwaves through Hollywood. And no one saw it coming. What really happened at Conan O'Brien's holiday party? What kind of tension simmers beneath champagne toasts and Hollywood laughter? And how could one evening, just one, set the stage for one of the most disturbing double homicides in recent memory? Let's walk into that party. Because the people who were there that night say something shifted. And by the time the Reiners walked out the front door, it was already too late. The invitation. Saturday evening. It should have been nothing more than a celebration. A festive, relaxed Hollywood holiday gathering hosted at Conan O'Brien's Brentwood property. Not far from the Reiners' own estate. The guest list? Exclusive. Not red carpet exclusive. Insider exclusive. The kind of list you only make if you're in the inner circle of legacy Hollywood. Directors, producers, writers, longtime friends, people who don't just work in the industry, but built it. Rob and Michelle were invited personally by Conan, someone Rob had mentored, laughed with, and collaborated with over decades. Their RSVP came early. Their names were on the top of the list. By 6:42 p.m., their black Cadillac Escalade pulled up outside the gated property. Security logged them in. Smiles all around. No one had any idea that within 12 hours, both Rob and Michelle would be dead. A party with polished smiles and cracked masks. At first, everything seemed normal. Waiters glided across the outdoor patio with trays of fig tarts and craft cocktails. A string quartet played jazzy holiday renditions. Guests posed for photos in front of a silver and white backdrop adorned with the O'Brien family crest in shimmering gold calligraphy. Rob and Michelle arrived dressed to match. He wore a navy blue cashmere coat. She wore emerald velvet with gold earrings shaped like tiny quills, a nod, perhaps, to her lifelong advocacy for writers' rights. They smiled for the photographers, embraced a few old friends. To the untrained eye, nothing seemed wrong, but those who knew them say otherwise. I saw Rob clench his jaw. One insider would later tell investigators. That only happened when he was holding back. Something was off with Michelle, another said. She kept checking her phone. She wasn't present. She was waiting on something. Or someone. The surprise arrival. And then he walked in. Nick. Uninvited. Unwelcome. Unforgiven. He was wearing a leather jacket, gray hoodie underneath, and those unmistakable limited edition Nike high tops. The ones fans would later freeze frame and analyze in every security photo, trying to connect the dots. He arrived alone. No +1. No smile. And absolutely no explanation. One guest, a screenwriter seated near the entrance, whispered later. When Nick walked in, the entire temperature of the room dropped. Rob's face turned to stone. Michelle froze. She put her wine glass down and stepped away from the charcuterie table without a word. An unrehearsed confrontation. It didn't take long. The Reiners and Nick ended up on the side patio, just out of earshot for most guests, but in full view of a few unlucky onlookers. What began as whispers quickly escalated. There was finger-pointing, raised voices. Why now? Rob reportedly demanded. Nick's voice was low, almost mocking. He shrugged, crossed his arms, said something that made Michelle gasp. Some say she even slapped him. Others claim Rob stepped between them. You are not part of this family anymore, Rob was overheard saying. To which Nick allegedly replied, you'll regret saying that. And that was it. Conan himself, sensing the shift, tried to intervene. An assistant was sent to offer drinks. Distract. De-escalate. But by then, the damage was done. Michelle walked back inside with tears in her eyes. Rob followed a minute later. Nick lingered on the patio alone. For 5 minutes. Just staring out at the decorative fire pit. A moment caught on camera. At 8:23 p.m., a photographer, hired to capture candid moments for guests, snapped a photo that would go viral within 48 hours. It showed Rob and Michelle standing by the Christmas tree. But what captured everyone's attention wasn't the pose, it was the background. Behind them, blurred but unmistakable, was Nick. His arms were crossed, his face unreadable. He wasn't looking at the camera, he was looking at them, with the kind of stare that makes your skin crawl in hindsight. Exit wounds, leaving the party. By 8:47 p.m., Rob and Michelle had had enough. No long goodbyes. No second drinks. They politely thanked Conan. Sources say Rob's handshake was brief, almost robotic. Michelle didn't say a word. They walked to the driveway, waved off the valet, and drove off in silence. The valet later recalled the strange mood. It felt like a funeral car, like they were driving into something dark. But Nick didn't leave. Here's where it gets even more unsettling. Nick didn't follow them out. In fact, according to party staff, he stayed another 45 minutes. drank a whiskey, sat alone on a bench, didn't speak to anyone else. When asked if he was okay, he said, "Never better." At 9:32 p.m., he exited through the back gate. Not the main one. A strange choice, considering he arrived through the front. Why take the long route? Was he avoiding someone? Or avoiding being seen? Theories begin to spiral. At this point, no one outside of the party had any idea what had occurred. But just hours later, whispers began circulating in elite Hollywood circles. "Did you hear Rob and Nick got into it?" There was shouting. Something bad. By Sunday morning, when news broke of the double homicide, the connection hit like a lightning bolt. Nick, the fight, the stare, the walkout. It was all too convenient. But the question that kept gnawing at everyone wasn't what happened at the party. It was, why was Nick there in the first place? Motive, or something more personal? Some speculated he wanted to apologize. Others thought he was there to confront them about the will. After all, it had been changed just 2 weeks earlier, cutting him out completely. A few insiders even believed Nick had planned to confront them in public, to cause a scene, force their hand, reclaim power. One theory, whispered, never confirmed, is that Nick was tipped off about the will's revision, that he knew his window to claim what he believed was rightfully his was closing fast. And when Rob refused to engage, that rage boiled over, not in the moment, but later, when no one was looking. Timeline suspicions begin. Investigators would later construct a chilling timeline. Rob and Michelle left at 8:47 p.m. Nick left Conan's house at 9:32 p.m. The Reiners were last seen alive by their neighbor at 10:15 p.m., returning home. Security footage shows their SUV pulling into their driveway. The house goes dark at 11 p.m. At 2:42 a.m., the security cameras glitch, go offline. And by 4:15 a.m., they were dead, murdered. But the killer left no fingerprints, no weapon, no sign of forced entry, unless they already had a way in, or already knew how to disable the system. And then, a text from Michelle's phone. At 4:37 a.m., just minutes after the estimated time of death, a text was sent from Michelle's phone to the family chef. "Don't come tomorrow. Feeling sick." Problem is, Michelle never had that chef's number saved. She always messaged through Rob's assistant. So who sent that text? And why? Was it meant to delay the discovery? By time to escape? Was it a cover-up? Or a game? The photographer who came forward. Days later, the photographer who snapped the infamous tree photo stepped forward and shared something even more disturbing. "I had a second shot," he told LAPD. "I didn't think much of it at first." The photo, taken just 12 seconds later, shows Nick standing alone in the foyer, looking at his phone. The screen is lit up. Zooming in, investigators noticed a single name at the top of the screen. Romy, as in Rob and Michelle's daughter. Why was he looking at her name? Was he texting her? Reading old messages? Was this a warning? A plan? Or was it guilt? But what came next would change everything. Because just one day after the murders, Nick vanished. No calls, no statements, no interviews, not even a comment to the press. He disappeared into the shadows of a city he once called home. But the silence was louder than any scream. Because when the police finally tracked him down, they discovered something in his car. Something that would take this case from tragic to utterly terrifying. What was found in Nick Reiner's car? And why did investigators go completely silent afterward? This wasn't just about blood or footprints anymore. This was about something premeditated, something psychological, and something that shattered the illusion of safety inside one of Los Angeles' most expensive homes. Because behind the locked doors of the Reiners' $13.5 million mansion was a shadow no one saw coming. Let's step inside. A fortress in the hills. The Reiner residence wasn't just a home. It was an architectural marvel, an L-shaped estate perched at the top of a secluded Brentwood cul-de-sac. 12-foot hedges lined the perimeter. A private gate required facial recognition or a security code to enter. There were cameras, motion sensors, 2 live-in staffers, a dog walker scheduled daily. It was, by all standards, a fortress. A home built not just for luxury, but for control, for order, for privacy. The type of place you don't just walk into, unless someone lets you in, or you already know how to bypass everything. Which is exactly what someone did. The Sunday that started in silence. It was Romy, Rob and Michelle's daughter, who unlocked the nightmare. After trying both her parents all morning, she arrived at the estate a little after 9 a.m. She used her own gate code, one only known to immediate family, and was buzzed through automatically. That, in itself, was odd. Because Michelle always answered the intercom. Always. Romy assumed maybe her mother had gone out for a walk or was napping. She parked in the circular drive, walked past the potted orchids Michelle loved so much, and opened the front door. What hit her first wasn't what she saw. It was what she didn't hear. No music, no murmurs of TV, no footsteps, no dogs barking, just cold, eerie silence. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a shroud. Then, she noticed the smear. A long, dark streak trailing from the edge of the foyer tile toward the living room carpet. At first, she thought it was wine, until she followed it, and found her parents. The crime scene details never made public. What Romy saw that day changed her life forever. But what police saw when they arrived hours later, that changed everything else. According to a leaked crime scene analysis, the following details were never meant to go public. Rob and Michelle were found positioned side by side, as if laid out intentionally. Rob had 9 stab wounds, 3 of which were described as deep and deliberate. Michelle had 6 wounds, most concentrated on the upper chest and neck. Both had their throats slit, post-mortem, with surgical precision. There was no forced entry, and the alarm system had been disarmed internally. A single bloody handprint was found on the wall near the den's entrance, partially wiped. Traces of a sedative were later found in Rob's system, but not in Michelle's. And here's the part that stopped detectives cold. Both victims had something clutched in their hands. Michelle was holding a crumpled photograph of Romy. Rob? A broken cufflink, engraved with the letter N. What the autopsy didn't say, but implied. When the autopsy report hit the media, it used standard language. Multiple sharp force injuries. Cause of death, homicide. No foreign bodies discovered. But what the report didn't spell out, yet quietly confirmed, was this. The attack wasn't frenzied. It was intentional, controlled, executed by someone who had time, and more disturbingly, familiarity. The wounds weren't haphazard. They were almost ritualistic. And in law enforcement terms, that meant one thing. This wasn't random. It was personal. Inside the house, a timeline of darkness. Investigators began reconstructing the events inside the house minute by minute. 10:15 p.m. Saturday. Rob and Michelle arrive home. A neighbor sees their headlights turn up the hill. No signs of distress. 11 p.m. The house goes dark. Lights off. TV off. No alarm activated. 2:42 a.m. All 6 perimeter cameras shut down simultaneously. 3:45 to 4:15 a.m. Estimated time of death. 4:37 a.m. A text is sent from Michelle's phone to the chef. Don't come tomorrow. Feeling sick. But here's the issue. Only one person besides Rob and Michelle had access to the house's internal security code and knowledge of the system's weak spots. Nick. The shocking discovery in Nick's car. When police finally located Nick Reiner, 30 miles away, sleeping in the back of his Jeep Cherokee in a parking garage near Santa Monica, they found something that wasn't supposed to exist. A black duffel bag. Inside, 1 pair of bloodstained gloves. A burner phone with no contacts, but 6 deleted messages recovered. A flash drive labeled Dad. And most chillingly, a knife, still wet, wrapped in an old Being Charlie Crew t-shirt from Nick's 2015 film. Forensics would later confirm it. The blood on the blade matched Rob and Michelle Reiner. But there was no immediate arrest. Why? Because Nick denied everything. Claimed the knife was planted. Claimed he hadn't been at the house in months. Said he was at the party, yes, but went home afterward and had no contact with his parents. When asked about the flash drive, he said, "You'll have to watch it to understand." The flash drive, the contents that shook investigators. What was on the drive? According to leaked reports, 2 things. A 14-minute video diary Nick had recorded in the weeks prior. In it, he rambled about betrayal, about being cut out of his family, about making them hear me. At one point, he says, "They'll remember who I am when the headlines hit." He ends the video by staring into the lens and whispering. Forgiveness was never an option. A text file labeled instructions. It read like a to-do list. Remove phones. Turn off perimeter cameras. Take the cufflink. Leave the photo. Text the chef. Destroy DVR. Each item marked off with an X. Every box checked. Except the last one. Burn the clothes. Left unchecked. That mistake would prove fatal for Nick's alibi. The closet that revealed the truth. Back at the Reiner home, detectives searched Nick's old bedroom, mostly untouched since he'd moved out years ago. At first glance, it was clean, neat, even nostalgic. Old yearbooks, framed photos, screenplay drafts, a dusty guitar. But in the closet, hidden behind a false panel, they found something else. A second, private Wi-Fi router, installed by Nick years ago during one of his brief returns home. Still active, still connected. Detectives traced the IP usage. And what they found? Someone had used that router to disable the camera feed remotely just after 2:40 a.m. from inside the house, from a tablet or phone on the same network. Nick's burner phone, recovered from his Jeep, had logs showing an active connection to that exact router. At 2:43 a.m., 1 minute after the cameras went down. And then, the strangest find of all. In the den, where Rob and Michelle's bodies were discovered, the investigation team noticed something odd. A record player, still spinning. No music playing, just spinning. They lifted the needle. The vinyl was a copy of A Hard Day's Night by the Beatles. But the record wasn't on that track. It had been playing track 7. You can't do that. Lyrics? I told you before. Oh, you can't do that / cause I'm the one who's winning. Intentional? Coincidence? Message? No one knew. But the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Neighbor footage that never aired. What sealed it for some? A neighbor's Ring doorbell camera. About 3 houses down, picked up a strange sound around 3:50 a.m. A dog barking, a car door slamming, and faintly, what sounded like a woman's voice screaming. Not once, but twice. Police asked for the footage to be kept from media. But like most things in Hollywood, it leaked. And internet sleuths did what they do best. Analyzed every second. Matched the timing. Matched the voice. Said it wasn't Michelle. Said it wasn't Romy. They believed it was someone else. Someone trying to stop what was already in motion. But there was one final piece of the puzzle. Remember the bloody handprint? Partial. Smudged. The forensic team enhanced it using proprietary software. And when the results came back, it was a match to someone with a criminal record. Someone with priors in assault and breaking and entering. Someone who hadn't lived in the Reiner house in years, but who knew it better than anyone. Nick. And yet, the biggest shock was still to come. Because while Nick was in custody, detained, questioned, uncharged, another letter surfaced. A letter addressed to Romy, found inside Michelle's jewelry box, dated 4 days before the murders. It read, Romy, if anything ever happens to us, don't believe the official story. You know who to look at. You've always known. There was no signature. But the handwriting? It was Michelle's. And what came next would force Romy to make the most painful decision of her life. What would you do? If your mother left behind a letter telling you to suspect your own brother, could you trust your memories? Your instincts? Could you hand over someone you once shared a childhood with for murder? Because Romy Reiner wasn't just a grieving daughter anymore. She had become the key to unlocking a case that was spiraling into something far more sinister. And when the final autopsy report came in, it shattered what little piece remained. A sister's choice. Romy spent the next 48 hours in complete isolation. No press, no police, no statements. She stayed inside her parents' guest house, the same one Nick had once lived in, poring over old photos, documents, and that haunting letter Michelle had left behind. If anything ever happens to us, don't believe the official story. What did her mother mean? Had Michelle expected something? Did she feel it coming? And more terrifying, was that letter written after seeing Nick again at Conan's party? She reread the words over and over until they blurred. And then, she made the call. To the district attorney. I'm ready to talk, she said. And what Romy revealed in that interview would change the course of the investigation forever. The missing nightmare. Romy's statement revealed one thing the public never knew. Nick hadn't just had fights with Rob and Michelle recently. He'd had a violent incident just 5 months before. A private altercation between Nick and Rob turned physical after a heated debate over a film project Nick had wanted funding for. He wanted Dad to bankroll it, Romy said. He said it was his redemption arc. Rob said no. Nick allegedly screamed, "You owe me for what you put me through." He smashed a glass on the kitchen floor. Michelle was so shaken, she fled the room. No police were called. No charges were pressed. They kept it quiet. Out of shame. Out of fear. That was the last time Nick had been in the house. Until the night they died. The full autopsy released. 3 days after Romy's statement, the LA County Medical Examiner's Office released the unredacted autopsy report to law enforcement and certain key legal personnel. It was not meant for the public, but pieces of it leaked almost immediately, and what it described was gruesome. Rob Reiner, 9 stab wounds, 3 in the upper chest, 2 in the lower back, for defensive wounds on forearms. Neck slashed post-mortem, likely as final overkill. Evidence of being restrained. Traces of lorazepam, Ativan, in bloodstream, a sedative. Michelle Reiner, 6 stab wounds, clustered tightly in upper abdomen and neck. Bruising on wrists and jaw, consistent with being grabbed or pinned. No sedatives in system. Neck slashed while still conscious. But here's what turned stomachs inside the coroner's office. The angle of the stab wounds. They were delivered from close range, with deliberate downward force, which suggests the killer stood over them, looking them in the eye, analyzing the blood. Forensic pathologists also studied the blood spatter patterns. They noted lack of cast-off patterns near walls, indicating precise, calculated blows. Blood pooling in straight lines beneath both victims, suggesting they were laid down post-mortem. Footprints traced to the entryway. Only one set, size 11 Nike, partially smeared, which matched the pair of sneakers found in Nick's Jeep. The soles, coated in dried blood, but not just any blood, a mixture of both Rob and Michelle's DNA. That detail mattered, because it proved one chilling truth. Whoever committed this crime was in close contact with both victims during the attack. But the toughest part? It wasn't the blood, or the stab count, or even the sedative traces. It was what they found in Rob's stomach contents. Undigested food. Matched to hors d'oeuvres served at Conan O'Brien's party, which confirmed what many had speculated. He was killed that same night, just hours after leaving the event. Estimated time of death? 3:50 a.m. Exactly in line with the security footage outage. Exactly in line with the Ring doorbell scream. Exactly in line with the final text from Michelle's phone. And that's when the detectives circled one specific word in their files. Premeditated. The sedative link. Here's where it got even more twisted. The lorazepam found in Rob's blood, it wasn't part of his prescription history. He hadn't taken it willingly. Police later discovered a prescription bottle, empty, in the guest house where Nick had once stayed. It was filled 4 weeks prior, under a fake name, but with Nick's fingerprints on it. He had gotten the sedative. He had hidden it. And, based on analysis, he had used it to weaken Rob, make him easier to subdue, make the act of killing less of a struggle. But Michelle? She didn't get the same mercy. She fought. The broken cufflink, a final message? Remember the cufflink Rob was found clutching? Engraved with an N? Detectives believe it snapped off during the struggle, possibly as Rob grabbed at Nick's shirt or arm. But some believe Rob held on to it intentionally, a final act of identification, a dying father's way of pointing the finger at his son. Tragic, poetic, brutal. But one detail shocked even seasoned forensics experts. Rob had a final injury, one not listed in the original report. It was found during the second examination, at the insistence of the Reiner family's private forensic team. A small puncture wound behind his left ear, barely visible, about the size of a pencil eraser. Further testing showed it was caused by a hypodermic needle. And what was injected? A concentrated dose of lorazepam, far stronger than a standard tablet. Rob wasn't drugged. He was sedated by force. Injected, just like an animal. A family friend breaks down. Amid the forensic chaos, one voice emerged. A longtime family friend, speaking on condition of anonymity, told an investigative reporter. Rob always feared this would happen, not because Nick was evil, but because he was lost. And when someone lost feels betrayed, they become dangerous. He paused. They should have cut ties years ago, but you don't cut off your child until it's too late. And then, a shocking twist in court. During a pre-hearing motion to introduce the autopsy as primary evidence, the defense objected. Why? Because Nick's legal team claimed that the autopsy was flawed. They argued the sedative was planted, the wounds were exaggerated, The cufflink was misinterpreted, but when asked why Nick never reported seeing his parents after the party, they had no answer. And Romy, watching from the front row, could barely hold it together, because she had read the report. She knew the truth, and the pain of realizing her brother had likely orchestrated this was worse than any forensic detail. But the autopsy hid one final detail. Until now, behind closed doors, one more item was discussed, not by the press, not by the police, but between the Reiner's private investigators and the district attorney. A small incision on Michelle's palm, not a stab, a cut, like she had been holding something tightly when it was ripped away. Under her fingernails, flesh. Later confirmed as Nick's. She had fought, not out of fear, but out of fury. She had seen her killer, and she had tried to stop him. But the next piece of evidence would shake even the most skeptical juror to their core. Because hidden deep in the Reiner estate, beneath the staircase, was a journal, one Rob kept in secret. And on the final page, dated the night of the party, he wrote, "He came. He ruined everything. I don't know if we're safe. I'm sleeping with the door locked tonight. Michelle's scared. I think he's planning something. If we don't make it out of this, tell Romy we love her." How do you prepare to walk into a house and find your parents murdered? You don't. You can't. Romy Reiner wasn't ready for what she was about to see that morning. And even if she had been warned, even if the world had told her to brace herself, nothing could have cushioned that moment. Because this wasn't just a crime scene. It was a message. A sick, twisted message meant for her. And in that moment, surrounded by blood, silence, and the cold, Romy realized the truth. She wasn't just the one who found them. She was the one they died trying to protect. The morning that broke her world. Sunday, December 14th. The sun was barely up when Romy woke. She was staying in her Venice Beach apartment, a small 2-bedroom walk-up filled with books, film reels, and the same type of vintage movie posters her dad used to collect. She had a missed call from her mother at 9:42 p.m. the night before. One ring. No voicemail. She hadn't called back. She figured they were tired. It had been a long day. The party. The fight. She assumed they were sleeping it off. But by 8 a.m., something didn't feel right. No texts. No, "Good morning, sweetheart." No Sunday brunch invite, the Reiner family's sacred tradition. Romy waited another 30 minutes before trying again. Still nothing. She texted her mom. "Everything okay? Call me please." Nothing. She texted her dad. "You guys ghosting me?" Still nothing. A cold dread settled in her stomach. She grabbed her keys, threw on a hoodie, and headed out the door. The drive. Brentwood is only about 25 minutes from Venice Beach. But Romy would later say it felt like hours. The silence of the road. The low hum of NPR she didn't realize was still on. She tried to calm herself. Tried to believe they'd just overslept. That their phones were off. That maybe, just maybe, they'd gone on a spontaneous morning hike. But in her gut, something twisted. When she turned onto their street. Lined with sycamore trees and $6 million homes, the driveway was quiet. The black Escalade was still there. She exhaled, relieved, until she noticed. The front door was cracked open. The entryway. Romy stepped out of her car slowly. There was no sign of movement. She called out once, softly. "Mom? Dad?" No answer. The door wasn't forced. It wasn't broken, just ajar, hanging slightly. She pushed it open and walked into silence. The house was cold. The heat hadn't been turned on. A draft slipped through the hallway. She saw the dogs' bowls still full. Their beds empty. No barking. That's when the smell hit her. Metallic. Sharp. Faint, but present. It caught in the back of her throat. She took another step. And that's when she saw it. A long, dark streak on the tile. Almost like someone had dragged something heavy. It led down the hallway. Toward the den. The discovery. She followed it. Slowly. Each step heavier than the last. And then she turned the corner. She didn't scream. Not at first. She froze. Because what she saw didn't register immediately. Her parents. Side by side. Rob's eyes open. His mouth slightly parted. Michelle's head tilted. Her arm extended. Blood soaked the Persian rug beneath them. Her mother's velvet holiday dress, ripped at the shoulder. Her father's hand clenched around something. She stumbled back. Her knees gave out. That's when the scream came. Primal. Uncontrollable. She fumbled for her phone. Her hands shaking so violently she dropped it. When she finally connected to 911, All she could say was, "They're dead. My parents, they're dead." The 911 call, transcript excerpt. Dispatcher, 911, what's your emergency? Romy, breathless. My parents, they're not breathing. There's blood. Oh my God, there's blood. Dispatcher, ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Are you in the home now? Romy, yes, Brentwood. Our house. I found them. There. Dispatcher, what's your address? Romy, they're not moving. They're cold. Dispatcher, are they conscious? Romy, sobbing, they're gone. They're dead. Please send someone. Police and paramedics arrived within minutes. They found Romy curled into the hallway wall, hands over her ears, rocking. A young officer helped her up. She couldn't look back at the den. She refused. And when they asked, "Is there anyone else who might have a key to this house?" she said just one word. Nick. The aftermath. Romy was taken to the hospital for observation. She was in shock. Heart rate spiked. Hands trembling uncontrollably. She didn't speak for 6 hours. When she finally did, her first words were, "Was there a note?" There wasn't. Not then. But what police did find was the broken cufflink in Rob's hand, the photograph in Michelle's, and a torn page from an old screenplay draft sitting on the coffee table. One of Nick's scripts. The title? Legacy. The moments she blamed herself for. Romy later confessed to investigators something that shattered her. She had almost gone to the party that night. She'd been invited. Conan had asked her. She loved the Reiner family events, grew up going to all of them. But she had plans. A date. Something casual. So she declined. If she had gone, could she have stopped it? Could she have defused the tension? Could her presence have altered fate? She would replay that question over and over. Every hour. Every day. For months. The daughter who became the prosecution's greatest witness. What made Romy so important to the case wasn't just that she found the bodies. It was what she knew. She was the only person alive who had seen her parents in their final days. Heard their concerns. Read the final emails. Found the sealed letter from Michelle inside the jewelry box. And, most crucially, she remembered something else. A story her mother told her the week before. "Your father's worried about Nick again," Michelle had said. "He said he's been acting cold. Calculated. He's not himself anymore." When Romy asked why they didn't get a restraining order, Michelle just smiled weakly. "He's still our son." The evidence she didn't know she had. After the murders, Romy was given access to her parents' digital accounts. She found dozens of saved voicemails, texts, and draft emails. One was addressed to Rob's lawyer. A draft titled, "Urgent, Nick, threat." It was never sent. Another was a voicemail Michelle had left for a close friend 2 nights before her death. In it, she said, "He's not like he used to be. It's like he's performing a version of himself, one that hates us. Rob doesn't sleep anymore. We're making changes. We've updated everything. If he finds out. God, if he finds out." The message cut off. Unfinished. Unanswered. Romy's final word to the press. Weeks later, after the arrest, the indictment, and the flood of media chaos, Romy made a short statement outside her family home. She stood in a black coat, flanked by her attorney and close family friends. The press leaned in, cameras clicking. She took a shaky breath, then said, "My parents were good people. Loving, generous, complex, yes, but they never stopped trying. They didn't deserve this. No one does. I've lost both my parents. But I also lost my brother. Maybe not in blood, but in everything else. If you've ever ignored a red flag because you love someone, please don't. It's the silence that kills. It's the pretending that breaks you." She didn't take questions. She didn't cry. She walked back into the house, alone. The same house that had once been filled with laughter, now filled with echoes. But there was one more secret she hadn't shared. One more moment. One more fragment. Something she'd kept hidden, even from police. And when she finally turned it in, it sent a chill through everyone who saw it. It was a video file. Sent to her from a private number at 2:41 a.m., the exact minute the cameras in the Reiner home went offline. She hadn't opened it at the time. But the subject line was just one word. Goodbye. What pushes a family to the brink? Not just dysfunction, not just pain, but betrayal so deep it becomes surgical. What happened between Rob Reiner and his son, Nick, didn't explode overnight. It simmered, beneath smiles, beneath red carpets, beneath Father's Day posts and Hollywood premieres. Until finally, at Conan O'Brien's party, it detonated. This wasn't just a family disagreement. It was the final confrontation in a decades-long war, and it was witnessed by dozens of Hollywood elites. But what they didn't realize at the time was that they were watching the first act of a double murder. Beneath the red carpet, years of unseen damage. To the outside world, Rob and Nick Reiner seemed like any other famous father and wayward son. Nick had grown up surrounded by fame. He'd attended elite schools, walked through film sets, and watched Oscar-winning scripts take shape in his own living room. But the shadows crept in early. Nick battled anxiety, addiction, rebellion. By age 16, he was in and out of rehab. At 19, he was arrested for drug possession. At 22, he released Being Charlie, a film based on his own chaotic upbringing, and it was lauded for its brutal honesty. But that honesty came at a price, because many believed the film was a coded attack on Rob. One source close to the family described it like this: it was a declaration of war, a son who felt abandoned, and a father who felt humiliated. The movie wasn't just catharsis. It was a warning. Broken trust, broken money. Over the years, Rob and Michelle tried everything. Therapy, funding projects, cutting him off, bringing him back in. Nothing worked. At one point, Rob set up a $500,000 trust for Nick, contingent on sobriety and mental health check-ins. Nick broke the terms within 9 months. Then came the final blow, a confrontation in August 2025, when Nick allegedly forged Rob's signature to secure a meeting with Netflix execs, claiming Rob would co-produce a script Nick had written. When Rob found out, he went ballistic. He pulled legal strings, shut down the deal. Michelle begged him not to go public. "He's still your son," she said. "No," Rob reportedly replied. "He's a stranger wearing our son's face." From that day on, all contact stopped, until the night of the party. The party revisited. An explosive confrontation unfolds. Saturday, December 13th. Conan O'Brien's Brentwood home. A crisp 64-degree evening. Lights strung across the garden. Laughter bubbling like champagne. Rob and Michelle arrived together. United, reserved, but present. Nick showed up alone. Security checked his name. It wasn't on the guest list. But he dropped his father's name, smoothly. "Just text Rob," he told the gate staff. "He'll want me here." The guard didn't bother. Nick slipped through. Inside, he hovered, watching, waiting, until Rob spotted him across the patio. According to one guest, an Emmy-nominated showrunner, the moment Rob saw Nick, his entire face changed. It drained of color. His glass trembled in his hand. And then he marched across the patio. What was said? Witnesses remember. They moved to a side area near the fireplace. Still visible, but slightly removed. Here's what multiple witnesses recalled. Rob's voice: "You weren't invited." Nick: "Didn't need one. We're family." Michelle: "Please, not here. Not like this." Nick: "I just want a few minutes. I deserve that much." Then the tone shifted. Rob stepped closer. "Rob, you deserve nothing." Nick: "You're a hypocrite." Rob: "You're dangerous. We're done." Nick: "Cut me out? I built this family too." At this point, Nick's voice was louder. People turned. One producer even began recording, but deleted the footage later, out of respect. Then came the line that would be repeated by every single witness. "If you come near us again," Rob said, "I'll have you arrested." Nick didn't flinch. He looked at Michelle, then back at Rob. "Then I guess I've got nothing left to lose." And he walked away. Michelle's final words to friends. After the confrontation, Michelle tried to compose herself. She spoke briefly with 2 close friends, both longtime film executives. She was shaking. "He's not the boy we raised," she whispered. "I don't recognize him anymore." They offered to get her a car. She declined. "Rob wants to drive. He needs to calm down." And then she said something chilling. "I don't think this ends tonight." Rob's face said everything. Back at the valet, Rob said very little. He clutched the keys. Michelle followed closely. He muttered something under his breath. A lip reader, analyzing footage later, claimed Rob said, "He's planning something." They got in the SUV, drove off. Cameras caught them exiting the gate. 8:47 p.m. That was the last time anyone saw them alive. Nick stayed behind. What many don't know, Nick didn't leave right after the fight. He stayed for 45 minutes. Alone. He poured himself a drink, sat by the fire pit, pulled out his phone, typed something, then deleted it. Multiple times. A staff member approached him to check in. He looked up and said, "You ever feel like your whole life is a movie, and you're just waiting for the climax?" She thought he was being poetic, but she'd later tell police. "He gave me the creeps." At 9:32 p.m., he slipped out through the back. Romy gets a strange text. That same night, at 10:14 p.m., Romy received a text from Nick. She hadn't heard from him in months. The message said, "Wish you'd been there." That's it. No context. She didn't reply, but later, she would scroll back to that moment in her messages, wondering what it meant, wondering what might have changed if she'd answered. Nick's late-night activity. Security footage later recovered from a gas station 5 miles from the Reiner home showed Nick's Jeep pulling in at 11:21 p.m. He bought a Red Bull, a disposable lighter, a pack of gum, and, most disturbingly, a pair of latex gloves. The cashier remembered him because he was oddly polite. Too polite. He smiled, like he was proud of something, she said. Then he drove off, in the direction of Brentwood. Estimated arrival at the Reiner home, 12:05 a.m. Right as the house went dark. The callous email he never sent. Forensic examiners would later find a draft email on Nick's burner laptop. Never sent. Titled, "To the Public." It read, "Sometimes pain makes monsters. But monsters are made, not born." And this monster was their creation. It was time-stamped, 2:39 a.m. 2 minutes before the home's security cameras shut off. The final argument becomes the final straw. Back at the party, no one thought the fight would lead to this. They'd seen celebrity family drama before. Heard yelling. Heard tears. But most chalked it up to stress. Egos. Power plays. They never thought they were watching the end of the Reiner family legacy. But in retrospect, they all said the same thing. Rob's voice wasn't angry. It was final. Nick's reply wasn't defensive. It was chillingly calm. And when Nick walked away, he didn't look back. But what happened next? No one was prepared for. Because hours after the party, when the Reiners were asleep in their home, a figure approached the house. A figure with knowledge of the layout, the codes, the cameras, the habits. And that figure didn't knock. He used the back gate, stepped through the garden, and entered the house like he'd done 100 times before. Only this time, he wasn't coming back out the same. And neither were they. What makes someone snap? Is it a slow burn? A lifelong wound that finally breaks open? Or is it something darker, buried deep, so far beneath the surface that even they don't know it's there? Because when Nick Reiner walked into that party, when he stared his father down, when he allegedly returned to that house in the dark, he wasn't just the son anymore. He was a ghost of someone the world thought they knew. So who is Nick Reiner, really? The tragic child of Hollywood pressure? Or the man behind one of the most shocking family murders in recent history? Let's pull back the curtain. The Prince of Hollywood. Nick Reiner was born into fame. Before he could walk, his face was on red carpets. By age 5, he was front row at the Oscars, clinging to Rob's hand as cameras flashed. To the world, he was the embodiment of Hollywood legacy, born of Rob Reiner, director of A Few Good Men, and grandson of comedy legend Carl Reiner. He lived in a world most kids only saw in movies. Private schools, lavish vacations, A-list birthday parties where Spielberg and Streisand mingled by the cake. But behind the scenes, that glittering world was breaking him apart. The early signs. Those closest to Nick say it began young. He was brilliant, talked early, wrote screenplays at 12, had an uncanny memory for film quotes. But he was also volatile, explosive. He'd slam doors, refuse to speak for days, lash out at teachers, nannies, tutors. By 14, he was expelled from 2 prep schools. By 15, he was experimenting with Oxy. By 16, he was in rehab. Michelle stood by him. Rob? Not always. Rob loved Nick, a family friend later said. But he didn't understand him. He saw rebellion, not pain. The distance between father and son grew with every missed therapy session, every relapse, until it wasn't a gap. It was a chasm, the redemption arc that never landed. In 2015, Nick co-wrote the semi-autobiographical film Being Charlie with his father. It followed a teenager's struggle with drug addiction and a complicated relationship with his politically famous father. Critics praised its rawness, its honesty, but behind closed doors, it created more tension. It wasn't fiction, one crew member said. It was a dramatized journal entry. Rob, though proud, reportedly clashed with Nick over creative control. Nick wanted it darker, more personal. Rob pulled back, worried about perception. It was the last project they ever worked on together. Nick never wrote another produced screenplay, a pattern of pain. After being Charlie, Nick vanished from public view. No interviews, no appearances. He was in and out of halfway houses. Diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Briefly engaged, then the relationship imploded amid allegations of controlling behavior. He lived off family money, tried launching a podcast, started, then abandoned a mental health nonprofit. By 2022, he was rarely seen outside of Brentwood. Neighbors said he walked alone, kept odd hours, spoke to himself. When asked how Nick was, Rob often brushed off the question. He's figuring things out. But in private? Emails from Rob to close friends show a different story. I don't know how to help him anymore. He's not just angry, he's manipulative. I'm scared of what he's becoming. The obsession with control. In the months before the murders, Nick's online presence revealed disturbing patterns. He posted cryptic messages on anonymous forums, quotes from The Godfather, diary-like rants, dark poetry. One post, dated just weeks before the murder, read, "What if the villain was never wrong, just misunderstood? What if exile makes you dangerous?" He browsed sites on family estrangement, legal loopholes in wills, forensic cleanup. The digital trail painted a picture of someone spiraling. And not just into sadness, but into strategy, planning, preparing, the inheritance he believed he deserved. Rob and Michelle had structured their estate to pass mostly to Romy. But Nick didn't know that. At least, not officially, until the week before the murders. That's when, according to Michelle's friend, Nick discovered the truth. He overheard something at brunch. Something about the will. He reportedly confronted Michelle via text. She ignored him. He tried calling Rob. Rob blocked his number. That same day, Nick posted a photo of a broken chess piece to his private Instagram. Caption, "Checkmate comes for us all." His relationship with Romy. Once close, Nick and Romy's relationship fractured after her college graduation. She was stable, grounded, everything he wasn't. When she refused to vouch for him during a family intervention in 2023, Nick stopped speaking to her. He told a friend she was a traitor, called her dad's golden girl. Yet on the night of the murders, he texted her, "Wish you'd been there." Was it sarcasm? Was it a plea? Or was it a taunt? Romy never answered. The notebook that changed everything. Police discovered a leather-bound notebook in Nick's Jeep during his arrest. It was filled with writings. Some pages were philosophical ramblings. Others were direct, terrifying. One read, "They took everything. Time to balance the scales." Another, "Don't bring a knife to a gunfight unless you are the knife." And the most damning? A rough sketch of the Reiner estate. Entry points marked. Cameras circled in red. A note beside the den. End scene. And yet, the contradictions. Here's the disturbing twist. Nick wasn't always the villain. At times, he was deeply empathetic. Friends recall him donating anonymously to shelters, sending encouraging messages to friends in recovery, helping organize a film school workshop for underprivileged youth. He wasn't a monster, one ex-girlfriend said. He was broken, but he wanted to be whole. That's what makes this so chilling. He knew right from wrong. He wanted redemption. He just couldn't stay on that path. The psychological profile. Experts brought in by prosecutors painted a clear picture. Nick exhibited traits of narcissistic personality disorder, deep abandonment trauma, delusional entitlement, obsessive control issues. He believed he had been wronged. He viewed his parents' rejection as betrayal. There will revision? An execution order. He didn't just want revenge. He wanted to rewrite the ending. Like any good screenwriter. Except this script wasn't fiction, and it had real victims. The police interview that shook detectives. During his initial interrogation, Nick said little, but one quote stayed with detectives. When asked if he was angry with his father, Nick leaned forward, smiled, and said, "Angry? No, I just wanted him to feel what I felt for 30 years. Then he leaned back and said nothing else. But one letter, written years earlier, tells a different story. A letter found in Rob's office drawer, dated 2017, from Nick. It read, "Dad, I don't know how to be what you want, but I love you. Even when you pretend I don't exist. If I die, it won't be drugs. It'll be from being invisible. I hope one day we talk like fathers and sons should. Rob never responded. The letter was never opened. Still sealed. So, who is Nick Reiner, really? A son desperate for love? A man poisoned by entitlement? An addict lost in the shadow of a giant? Or a killer who calculated every move like a script? Maybe he was all of them. Maybe none. But one thing is certain. By the time the sun rose over Brentwood on December 14th, Nick Reiner wasn't just a name on a family tree. He was the epicenter of an earthquake that would shake Hollywood to its core. And what happened when Nick was brought to court was unlike anything the public had ever seen. What if the most critical piece of evidence in a double homicide investigation simply vanished? What if 6 high-tech security cameras, installed around a $13.5 million estate, went dark at the exact moment the crime was committed? No backups, no glitches, no warnings, just silence. Because that's exactly what happened the night Rob and Michelle Reiner were killed. The footage that should have told us everything, who entered, when, how, was gone, erased, or worse, replaced. This wasn't a technical malfunction. This was precision sabotage. And it pointed to one chilling truth. Whoever did this knew the house better than anyone.